This episode of the Police One podcast is sponsored by Officer Store. Learn more about getting the gear you need at prices you can afford by visiting officerstore.com. Hey, welcome back. You're listening to Policing Matters on policeone.com. I'm your host, Jim Dudley. Hey, be sure to check out our video versions of the Policing Matters podcast on YouTube, on Police One YouTube. Well, we've heard from experts on the subject of vehicle stops or car stops by police officers, usually from the perspective of police officers. Good friend of mine, Jason Lehman, has talked about behaviors by both parties at the stop from the motorist and the officer perspectives. When he talks about his program, the WYSM, Why'd You Stop Me workshop, and I know he's in Northern California taking his program around to different agencies there. Today, we'll hear from the community perspective. Mr. Dwayne Bryant is an internationally acclaimed speaker and best-selling author of the book, The Stop, Improving Police and Community Relations, a timely guide that focuses on educating youth and facilitating meaningful dialogues between communities and law enforcement. Well, welcome to Policing Matters, Mr. Dwayne Bryant.
Great to be here, sir. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. Now, STOP stands for Support the Teaching of Principles. What was your background that gave you the inspiration to write this book on car stops?
Sure, absolutely. For the last 26 years, my company, we've been developing social-emotional learning, life management, character education programs for youth in Florida, Chicago. We've done work in Memphis. We've done work in Seattle and Pennsylvania, et cetera, and as well as Arizona. So what we do is we try to provide life skills for young people so they can be better and more productive human beings. So we teach goal setting, time management, conflict resolution, bullying education, study skills, leadership, et cetera. One day I was on the south side of Chicago working with 4th, 5th, and 6th graders, and I asked a simple question. If you're on the playground playing, minding your own business and doing nothing wrong, if a police car drove over, what would you do? Jim, what do you think they said they do?
Run.
Yeah. Surprisingly, they said run. And I said, well, wait a second. I said, you're doing nothing wrong. Why would you run? These babies said, because we don't want to be harassed. We don't want the police to stop us from going home, and we don't want to get shot. Or the bigger boy said, well, I won't run, but if they disrespect me, I'm going to disrespect them. So I'm sitting there as an adult thinking, oh my God, these are literally 4th, 5th, and 6th graders who will become 11th, 12th, and school people. Eventually, if that's their thought about law enforcement at such a young age, it can only get worse. And so I just decided I need to be a force for good, or at least a bridge to bridge this gap together. My father was a police officer. I wanted him to come home, even though chapter 2 of the book will tell you what kind of police officer he was. He was the kind that'll beat you across the head, which is why he had the nickname Bull Bryant. So I just knew that I didn't feel like enough was being done to bridge this gap, to create some level of calm between police and community. So I was willing to stand in the gap.
All right, I get all that. And saying that and your experience with these kids, do you see any of the policing, the community policing outreach working? Cops stopping, shooting hoops, talking with kids to just get that dialogue going? Any of that working?
Yeah, I think it does work, but I think there's no silver bullet. I think, you have cynical people on both sides. You have people saying, oh, they want to play basketball, but that doesn't solve the problem. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't solve the problem, but there's no silver bullet, no one strategy that will solve the problem, because the reality is this problem has been existing for probably centuries, realistically speaking. And so therefore, it won't be a one size fits all solution. But I do think it does help. It does work, but it's not the only thing that needs to be done.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's the Westinghouse theory that you've got to do something, right? And we've had Officer Plunkett from Irving, Texas, talk about his barbershop program, where he just goes into barbershops and hangs out and talks with people there. And it's really successful in creating those, community partnerships. Now, many in our audience serve as frontline officers in their agencies. What should they know about the individual who gets pulled over by police? What are they thinking?
Well, I would say it depends on the individual. If the individual is black or Hispanic or brown, as they say, I would say they should know that the person is scared as hell, right? Generally speaking, not everyone. Now, I am college educated, went to school on a full academic scholarship, never been in jail, never been in handcuffs, no criminal history at all. But if I see those red lights pulling me over, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm looking, okay, what did I do? Did I run it? Was I speeding or whatever? So those thoughts are going on. I have friends in the FBI and they tell me, D, an FBI agent with my firearm on my side, nervous when I get pulled over by the police. So I think not just what the police should understand, I think what police and community should understand is oftentimes everybody's scared. So here's the deal. If everyone is afraid, then what do we do as individuals, as human beings, not police, not community, but as human beings to mitigate the fear so that we don't allow a 20-minute traffic stop to derail 20 years of either one of our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. And for the record, I get scared too. But I mean, I think our
Now,
fears,
why are you scared, Jim?
my scare is monetary. I fear getting that ticket and having to go to court or to pay the fine or get that number on my DMV record. So,
Yep.
I mean, I think we all have different fears, right? So maybe we have a fear that we're being picked out for a wrong reason. Maybe it's the violation. Maybe we have something to hide. So we all have different fears, but I think none of us are under the impression that we're getting pulled over to say, hey, just thought I wanted to mention you have a great looking car or you're a really great driver. I don't think that's happening.
You mean they don't compliment you on your nice silver black hair, Jim? Because it looks pretty good on this Zoom call.
Silver, that's complimentary. I appreciate that. Hey, so the nation has been influenced by the resist movement. And, I actually looked it up and there's a website that talks about resist and resistance. And isn't that part of the problem? I mean, across, all races, genders, ethnicities, we have different groups for different reasons saying they are going to resist. We have people claiming to be sovereign citizens. Shouldn't it be, hey, officer says I stopped you for the red light violation, license and registration, please. Can I see your ID? I'm going to do a check and I'm either going to give you a warning or a ticket. And, boom, it's over. Shouldn't that be the way? What's the reason for the resistance in getting pulled over?
Sure. Well, that's a beautiful question. Let me answer it with a two-prong. According to science, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction, right? So when we have something as egregious as watching a man be murdered for 9 some odd minutes, whoa, that is an action that we all see. So then based on the science, it's going to be an equal and opposite reaction. So that reaction is, F you. We're not doing what you have to say. I disrespect you because I have no value for you. Whoa. So the question is, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Well, guess what? They're both present. So let's deal with both of them. So I think the resist movement came as a result of consistently seeing certain actions that were not being either held accountable. So therefore, we create this reaction. Now, to your question, and even in my book, I say if you're driving, you're supposed to have a driver's license by law. So why are you driving without a driver's license? This is not a constitutional inquiry that we need to give the law enforcement officer. But if you're driving, you're supposed to secure that photo ID. I don't go into all of the why do you stop me, because at the end of the day, I just don't know what kind of day they're having. They're human beings as well. They may be having a bad day. So I teach community when I'm working with young people, hey, think about, I say when you pull up to a stop sign, we're taught to look left and right, look both ways. So look both ways, look to the right and to your future. Where do you see yourself 20 years, 10 years down the road? Do you want this to impact that? Then look to your left. Okay, this person is coming. You've done something, like you said, to attract their attention. It may not be anything you've really done. It could have been a call they got that you're driving a car that looks like something else. You don't know. So when you look to the left, you have to have what Chris Voss called tactical empathy, right? What was going on, but at least let me calm my emotions down, calm my fear down for a second, and at least give you the benefit of the doubt. So I believe both law enforcement and community have got to engage in that level of human interaction. But guess what? The reality is there's some bad human beings out here. Some of them wear badges, some of them are community members. So now we've seen so much happening, we no longer have that a few bad apples conversation anymore, because it's more than that. So I believe that the resist movement came as a direct result of people seeing things over and over again, and they're just tired. To your point, yes, we should understand the responsibilities of driving a car. When you get pulled over, the officer's job is to do their job, and our job is to facilitate their job and make it easier for them. That is what I believe.
Yeah, and I hear what you're saying, but I've got to believe that there's such a media focus on bad behavior, and of the thousands and thousands of car stops, what we are seeing in their own space and time are anecdotal, right? These are one-offs, or maybe it is an officer who's abusing their power, but the fact that we're seeing it on the nightly news or social media or in the newspaper, isn't that part of the problem as well?
Well, I wouldn't say it's part of the problem, because like it exists, right? So let's say if the reality is less than 3%, I think that's what the number is, less than 3% of all police stops, and we're talking about hundreds of thousands of stops a day happening around the country. So 3%, everyone would say, yo, if I got a 97% on a grade, I'm pretty cool with that grade. I got an A. But unfortunately, that 3% that may go bad is what the news media cover. They don't show the officer with the great stop. They don't show the black guys who had a flat tire and the officers went out. Because I've seen this before. I was like, that's so interesting. These guys got the locks, they got the pants sagging, but the police officer is actually there helping them change their. And I posted, I said, I bet you would never see this on the news. So, but the news has to do their job, and their job is to get ratings. Unfortunately, we prefer garbage than we do love. You and I talking on this show right now will probably not go viral. But if I was to call you, you jerk, you no good, and slap my camera and slap you, and you pull out a gun, we'd go viral. For some reason, we prefer filth than we do love and peace.
Yeah. No, I hear you. Yeah, if it bleeds, it leads. That's the media motto. Hey, what's the primary issue? I mean, you've seen and you've dissected hundreds of car stops. What do you see as the primary issue for the escalation? Walk up to the car, license and registration, then it goes sideways.
Sure. There are many primary issues, right? So if I go to several DOJ studies when they assess different police departments. Memphis was one, Chicago, Minneapolis. Many law enforcement officers have not been properly trained. Many of them have implicit bias on the job. Many of them are using firearms in a way that is not within the policy manual. So there are many different lanes, I guess, we can go around. If we look at the community don't understand their responsibility. A friend of mine was telling me when she got pulled over, her teenage brother was in the car, and he just started panicking. So he dropped his cell phone. So he's looking down, trying to get his phone, like, I want to record this. And she slipped him and said, still. Because I said, I'm so glad you did that, because what the police officer sees is, they don't know what's going on. So I think what is happening with police stops, again, everybody's scared as hell. When I got pulled over, my police encounter that went viral, that right now the Indiana State Police is still using some of that footage called Do It Right. When the officer said, every stop, I don't know if this is going to be the day that I have to use all of my training, or is this the day that I may lose my life? And I was like, whoa, wait a minute, you're thinking that? I said, honestly, I'm thinking the same thing in reverse. I don't know if this is the day I'm going to lose my life, or this is the day that it's just going to be a good stop. So that's when I realized it was a eureka moment, which happened like 2 months after my conversation with the students, that, whoa, we're all scared as hell out here. The difference is you got a gun and the law on your side. I don't have those things on my side. So it behooves me to be mindful of my actions, but it also behooves the officer to be mindful of his or her actions as well.
Yeah, good point that you bring up about training, and especially towards the end of a police academy. Sometimes they move it to the middle, but generally towards the end, they do sims or simulations. And, you have these car stops or home visits where they are escalated quickly to see what the young officer's response is going to be, and then they turn them out loose. So training, you think that training has something to do with the reactions by some officers on stops? And if so, what do we do about it?
Absolutely. So two things. Yes, absolutely trainings. Also, who is the field? Who are they being trained by? I've been told in Seattle with some work that I was doing, some of the younger officers like, yo, this training was great because guy who trained me is like, hey, sometimes you gotta come across the head. And I'm like, whoa. So training is important, but it's also just as important as who is doing the training. Even before training, even before they become a law enforcement officer, do we know their implicit bias? Do we know their history? Because the reality is, if grew up, I was talking to a wonderful officer. He and I, at first we butted heads, but as we began to have conversations, it's like, "Dude, I get you." He said, listen, I grew up in an all-white town. Didn't have black friends. And what I saw about black folk was stuff on the news, or if they came in the neighborhood, there was some trouble. So that's what my were about black people. I said, listen, I cannot be angry with you about that. That's your reality. I said, guess what? I grew up in Eatonville, Florida, an all black town, all black police department, black fire department, black gas station, black hotels, and everything. We didn't want to hang out with white people. If they did come to Eatonville, they were either coming for drugs or they were coming for some trouble. So my perception and your perception are really about the same in reverse. I said, but what we have to do is understand that if I'm going to engage with you, and especially if I have on the uniform and the badge, I have to be constantly checking my perceptions because those perceptions will dictate my actions. I teach my students your thoughts impact your words impact your behavior impact your actions impact your destiny. So if all of that stuff is going on, and it is with every stop, I think even before the training happens, we got to know what police officer this is. Like a Derek Chauvin, he's going to be a liability for any police department because what is his implicit bias? And once those biases happen, they're going to be more costly and devastating to the department and the community. And I believe from working with different officers, most of them don't want those guys on the force because they're a liability for them as well. So all of that psychological background profiling has to be a part of it. The verbal judo have to be a part of it because guess what? Some people just don't like police. Some people are just afraid. So if they escalate and the law enforcement escalates because they have to be bigger and badder, we're just creating chaos.
Yeah. Hey, I want to ask you, I know you've done research. I know you've looked at the studies. I want to ask you about that. But first, I'd like to take a moment and thank our sponsor.
Officer Store, equipping protectors with passion. That's how we operate, and it's how we live. We understand that having the right gear can mean the difference between life and death. Our goal is to get you the gear you need, when you need it, at prices you can afford. Visit us at officerstore.com.
And we're back, and I'm speaking with Mr. Dwayne Bryant. He is a speaker and an author, and he does presentations to community members and the police on what to do about car stops. What are we thinking? How do we diffuse things? How do we both end up on a good term and going home? So the Bureau of Justice Statistics does a supplemental survey on the National Crime Victimization Survey, random phone calls, if you will, directly related to vehicle stops. What did they come up with? What was their conclusion?
That's a great question. I'm going to ask you the same question. I don't know if I have the most recent data that you have, but if you can share it, I'd love to hear it.
Yeah, so 2020 was the last survey that I've seen. And it talks about the approaches. It talks about the small number of stops that go sideways and how important training is. So I think there's an emphasis on officer safety for good reasons, but those types of car stops that result in attacks on officers is relatively low. So I think it essentially says to do what you're doing, reach out, demystify the process. We've done a couple of shows here. I talked about Jason Lehman, but we talk about, keep your hands on the steering wheel, like you said before, you drop your cell phone, you don't go reaching around. We in law enforcement, we're trained to see that as a furtive movement. Then you come up with this, small black plastic object or a black object in your hand. Yeah, I mean, those are things we're trained to look for. And so I think we've got to be meeting on both ends of the spectrum. And of the thousands of car stops, they don't end in armed confrontations or lethal encounters or even physical encounters. So we need to be more transparent. We need to make sure that the individual knows why they're stopped. We need to treat everyone cordially, just the facts, license, registration, sign hard, 3 copies. Thank you. Have a nice day. Right. I think if we go back to those basics, we're good. But then we've got those encounters where, oh man, I'm driving with a suspended license. I've got something under my front seat. This car isn't mine. I actually don't know whose it is. Right. And I think we can talk about terms of what goes on in our own minds. And we all think about the worst things that can happen. But hey, if you're driving with a suspended license, unless there's an order to take you in, it's another citation. Pull over the car, give me the keys, let's turn it over to the owner. If it's stolen, then you're going to get arrested. You're going to have your day in court. So all of that can be handled without a physical encounter and hopefully without going to weapons use or a fatal encounter. So it's good to look at those things, but those reports are so quantitative, right? They're all about numbers and percentages, when we really need to look at qualitative, like what's happening, how is it related to training, and then let's fix training. Or if it's happening because of a law that's on the books, let's make sure that every driver knows about the law. And then let's make sure that everyone knows what can happen. Like not every violation ends up in a custodial arrest, that there's a possibility for a license check and then a citation, or maybe the car gets towed or something like that, but that not everybody ends up going to jail. I think transparency has to be part of our strategy.
I agree with that. I also think too, it comes down to the individual officer as well as the individual person that's getting pulled over. This is a true story. I will not say which city or which department. After one of my trainings, one of the officers said, you know what? Thank you. This presentation did more for me than all of this, quote, DUI, BS that we're tired of hearing about, telling me that I'm racist. He said, but here's a fact. When I was a younger officer, I used to walk behind Black guys and say, hey, what about that arrest warrant? And if they start running, he said, I'd chase them, rough them up a little bit, arrest them. I said, why would you do that? He said, because if they didn't have an arrest warrant, why would they run? I said, but did you know whether or not they had an arrest warrant? He said, I didn't, but why would they run? I said, are you kidding me? I'm like, that is part of the freaking problem. So fear makes you do flight or fight. These are psychological, these are scientific reactions that people have, and everyone responds differently. I said, let me ask you this. Do you think your adrenaline was pumping while you were running? He's, oh, I'm trying to get them. I said, yeah. Do you think their adrenaline was pumping? Yeah. Cortisol? Yeah. I said, so what's going on is you created a scenario, whether they did have an arrest warrant or not. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. So if this person is struggling against you and now you go into fighting, you shoot them, quote unquote, lawfully because they're resisting arrest. But where did it start? It started from your terrible behavior. This is not becoming of a police officer. He was like, I just didn't think about it at the time because this is what we were told, that if you want to get these numbers up. So it's almost like I believe law enforcement has to look at itself first and say, what are we doing right? Let's advertise it, let's broadcast it, let's share the stories, let's, rah, pat ourselves on the back. Now, what are we doing wrong? I believe the right way outlasts the wrong, but there is wrong. And now we got to go to the community and say, hey, what are we doing right? Okay, what are we doing wrong? Pookie is a drug dealer from this corner and he's selling drugs. This dude is child trafficking in the neighborhood. You know what the hell's going on, but yet you don't tell law enforcement. And I always say that the only people who benefit when police and community do not work well together are the criminals, whether that criminals in a hoodie or whether that criminals wearing a badge. The only people who benefit when law enforcement and police and community do not cooperate are criminals. And what we have to do is forget about us versus them, because that's that polarization that's happening in our nation right now, which is America had got to wake up really quickly, because she's not looking that good on a global level. But if we can do that, stop demonizing each other, which we can do, and just hold everybody accountable. That stuff we're talking about now, won't that 3% can go down to 1%, because 3%, if you say if there's 1 million stops, well, 3% might be 30,000. That's a lot of butt whooping going on.
That's a good point. Yeah, I like to go back to that communication and the demystifying. A lot of times I'll talk about driving in my classes, my criminal justice classes, and I talk about the fact that I ask the question, is driving a right or a privilege? And a lot of students know it is a privilege, right? You've got to get trained. You've got to learn the rules of the road. You've got to ride along with the instructor or your evaluator, and then you get signed off and you get your license. But I always ask the students, hey, remember when you signed that form that said that you will be that you will submit to a test of your blood, breath, or urine when asked to do so by a police officer? And they're like, oh, no, what? I don't remember that. And I'm telling them, this is implicit when you get your license. And if an officer pulls you over for erratic driving or violations, checks out the objective symptoms, smells alcohol or some other associated behavior, they pull you out of the car and give you a field sobriety test. And we've seen so many of these car stops where that's that defining moment. I'm not getting out. You can't search me. I'm not getting out. I don't have to show you anything. I don't have to submit to a test. Well, you do. And I don't think that we teach that enough. And I don't think that the emphasis is there. Maybe it is, but clearly there's some miscommunication in the responsibilities and the obligations of the driver when a police officer pulls them over.
Yeah, I think that's that part of that education. We talked about law enforcement, but community needs to be educated as well. A lot of times I do reenactments with the young people, and I say, hey, you're walking home from school. It's for you guys. The police officer says, hey, my name is Mr. Bryant, and I talk to you a little bit, and I pat you down. I said, do I have a right to pat you down, to touch you at all? That's what they say. They all say no. I said, really, is there any reason that I can pat you down? They're like, no. And so I said, well, let's do this reenactment. You guys do what you normally would do. So I pat one guy down. The first thing he does is slap my hand. And so they have no understanding that if I got a call that there's 4 guys who happen to look like these guys, and I think one has a weapon, well, that's reasonable suspicion. So now I can lawfully pat you down, but they don't know the law. And so what they do is emotionally have a reaction to the law, even though they're in violation of the law, because they just don't know. So I think education and hands-on training is necessary in the schools, whether it's an SRO, whether it's someone from the outside like myself coming in to engage the students, because the reality is we need to be teaching respect, not just community respect police, but police respect community as well, just the respecting of authority. Sometimes that respect is your teacher. A lot of these kids don't even respect their teachers. Respecting authority is like a thing of the past now. So I think we have to get back to some of those old values, morals, instead of all of this nilly-willy, loosey-goosey stuff that everything goes. That is not going to work for us down the long term.
I hear you. Hey, respectful of your time, I want to thank you so much for being on the show. I want to end with your final thoughts on what else needs to be done. What should we be doing? What should we introduce? What haven't we done yet to make sure every car stop is Last thing you say, have a great day.
Okay. Well, I think most of it is really, we all have to remember, the first law, treat others like you want to be treated. Be respectful. Understand what your rights are. Understand what the police rights are. And then create calm so that you don't allow 20-minute encounter to derail 20 years of your life. It makes no sense at all. Remember, we're all human beings. And at the end of the day, we all want to go home and get home safely.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, in our show notes, we have your book, we have your website. What else are you doing? Are you touring, going to police departments, community groups?
Yeah, well, fortunately, I took this past month off because, Jim, I was so freaking burnt out. I've been on 2 planes a week, man. And I'm just like, you know what? This world is not transforming because I'm out here on 2 planes a week. Better take care of myself. So a couple of things. I started a new line. If you go to doriginal.com, I started this new line called God Works and Love is Everything. Because whether I'm working with the students in Memphis who are 15, 16, 17-year-old first and second degree murderers, or whether it's working with law enforcement, I'm seeing, or whether it's working with parents or teachers, I'm seeing there's a level of godliness that is missing. And there's a level of just love for humanity that I am my brothers, I am my sister's keeper, that I want to try to reintroduce to this world. So you can go there, my website, DwayneBryant.com, the book. In the next 2 weeks, I'm getting ready to get back on those planes. So you'll be hearing a lot from me. I also have a YouTube channel, Dwayne Bryant, as well.
Well, that's great. Yeah. Take care of yourself. That's number one.
Absolutely.
Hey, thank you for taking time. Dwayne Bryant, speaker, best-selling author of the book, The Stop, Improving Police and Community Relations. You're doing God's work. Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother. And they can get that book on Amazon. Even if they go to the website, there's a link directly to Amazon.
All right. Sounds great.
All right. Thank you.
All right, you bet. Hey, our listeners, let me know what you think of today's show. Check out the links below and drop me a line at policingmatters@policeone.com, policingmatters@policeone.com. If you're only listening, check out our YouTube. If you are listening on Apple, give us 5 stars. I don't know if you only get 4, but give us 5. Hey, and let us know how we're doing. All right. Let me know who you want to hear from, what you want to hear about, and I'll see what I can do. And thanks so much for listening, and take good care and take care of yourself as well.